answering some questions that we have received, and some of the questions that I've heard that we've had. So I hope that I answer all your questions, but if not, we do have a microphone up here, and I will have some time for questions. If you have any questions, you can come and bring them at that time. First, I want to say people have been asking for a list of leaders. Here is the list. It's in a yellow sheet of paper. I've got the master copy. But take a look at this. And I found out that it used to be posted we had a quarterly newsletter, and you get reports from those leaders, and you know who they were, and you heard from them. That's something that we may look to do in the future again, and it might be nice to hear reports from our different persons of the church, rather than just reading from me all the time. So, and the announcements of our church, but I think that'd be nice. So Jamie and I, our new administrative assistant, are going to be looking to do that, maybe hopefully in the future. So here's that. And then today, my meeting today is just to give you an update on the life of the Methodist Church as we look towards the future. Some members of us have been to presentations by district superintendents around Florida who's been speaking on the future of our Methodist Church, and some of that I'll bring to you today. If you would like to attend one of those, there is one that is planned, that is a church has asked for it in San Lando on the 22nd of August. You can attend that one if you were not able to go and would like to go to hear some more information, and to hear information from our district superintendents, and not just from me. But we've received questions, and we know that there's confusion and concern, and so hopefully we'll be able to talk about those today and have questions answered as we look to the future of our Methodist Church and our church here, our local church. And so I've received some questions. The question is our church splitting? I've also heard a question, is our church closing? I've heard that come up from before, and so the answer to both of those questions are no. Our church has not made any steps to leave the Methodist Church. We are not taking part in any of the lawsuit that you saw. We have talked about the situation in our leadership council meetings. And so at this time, we do not deem ourselves to be going in that direction. Though, just to let you, or for you aware, you have noticed that people have left the church already. There's 12 churches who left at annual conference, what's called the disaffiliation. They are leaving to join another denomination, which is the Global Methodist Church or others. In this process, it's just to let you know, so you're aware of how those church came to that. The process has to start with the church council. The church council holds a vote, and then it is presented to the entire body. And again, we have talked about our church in our church council meetings. You are invited to all of our church council meetings, but at this time, we do not deem it necessary. If there was a successful vote in the church council, the DS would be called, and then he would hold what is called a church conference. This would be the official vote taken for the process of disaffiliation, which 12 churches have done. The Book of Discipline, there's a paragraph numbers associated with these. In the paragraph, after we vote, or our church vote, it then goes to the annual conference. The annual conference would then have to vote, which happened this June, a month or two ago, and they voted, and we voted to help churches leave as they so desired. After this, for financial responsibilities are given to each church who wanted to leave. Someone has asked me, just to know, just to be aware, it does not mean that we are moving in that direction. Someone was curious, and they asked how much it would be for a church like our church in particular. And it's around a little less than $100,000 that would have the responsibilities to move forward with a disaffiliation. But the bishop has said that there are a number of other churches who did not get voted on who would like to leave this year, and you'll see some announcements coming in the future. The bishop is going to set a special conference for those churches. It'll be probably in the fall. We usually have a bishop's retreat at Warren Millis, back before COVID, and we would all gather together and the bishop would speak to us. And so this year the bishop has said instead of that, they're going to hold a virtual vote for those churches, and something else that I'll mention in a minute. But all this to say, our church has not made any steps to leave as far as the conference is concerned. We are still a church that wishes to remain a part of the United Methodist Church. So I say to you today, if you personally have a desire to leave the UMC, I would ask that you would come to me and talk to me. I hope I've portrayed myself as a safe person to talk about anything with. We don't feel that we need a vote, but if we do need to have a vote, we need to hear from you. We need to hear from the congregation. It is not my choice. It is your choice as the congregation. You sitting in the pews need to let us know of your desires and wishes. And so I ask you, if you have that desire, talk to me, and I would love to be a place of openness to talk to you about that. I will be your pastor through it all. No matter what, I will be your pastor. At the end of the day, I will remain in the United Methodist Church, but I will help you as a church move you to where you desire to be. I was also asked if our church has no desire to leave the United Methodist Church, what should we do? The answer is, from the conference, we do not need to do anything. If our church does not wish to leave, we need to just remain doing what we're doing, being the church, and doing constant on everything that we're doing. We don't have to hold any vote. We don't have to do anything if we desire to stay. Regarding the health of our local church, OCUMC, if there is any concern that we will close, the answer is no. Our conference sees us as a very strong church. We are healthy in their mind. We're not in any debt. We pay 100% of our apportionments. We give enough to support our budget each year. Sometimes we cut a little close, but we give enough to support our budget. We have a healthy number of people. We are active in the life of our church. We have a strong missional presence, which they look for. We found out this week that we give around, I think it's 1,000 or so meals a month, 10 to 12,000 meals a year. Is that right, Sue? 10 to 12,000 meals a year to people in our community. Yes, that is definitely a thing to celebrate. Think of all the meals that we give out. 100,000? Oh, 100,000, excuse me. Yes, I want to make sure they're clear. Thank you. So 100,000 meals, that's definitely a wonderful thing for us to celebrate. And we have an active body who are on the path of discipleship, which is another thing. Small groups, fellowship attendance. That is concern, and our conference sees us as a healthy church. Now, the health of the Methodist Church as a whole is a little strained. You may have been aware of some of the strainedness and some of the controversies. There is a group who maybe you know, maybe you do not know. My own parents didn't know, but there's a group calling for reform, and they are leaving the denomination. They have already left. They have left on May 1st. This group within the Methodist Church has left and formed a new denomination. They formed it on May 1st. Body had two names. So if you hear these two names, don't be confused. They are the same body. Wesley Covenant Association, that's where they were when they were association. Now that they're a denomination, they're newly formed. They are the Global Methodist Church. Global Methodist Church. Again, May 1st of this year, they launched themselves as a denomination. It was created by Methodist pastors, leaders in the church who wanted to reform aspects of the church or keep certain aspects the same, making sure one of the stance was homosexuality. They wanted to be sure that our current stance does not change, and they want to possibly even reform parts of it. So when they started as association, they came out with a document, Wesley Covenant Association, and I wish I could find that document. It told us what drew them to form as an association. I remember reading it. Some of the things on their list was the ordination process, communion, apportionments, and of course the stance on marriage. Those are the things that came out. I think it was around 2015, 2016 when I remember reading the first document from the Wesleyan Covenant Association. our current stance right now in the book of discipline, we don't talk about it much. Sometimes we just talk about the issue itself. But I just want to remind you all the current stance, what it is now. It's from 1972. The UMC does not condone the practice of homosexuality, considers the practice incompatible with Christian teaching. It also says ceremonies that celebrate homosexual unions shall not be conducted by our ministers and shall not be conducted in our churches. The current book of discipline also states that the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. You may have heard that. Therefore, self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not to be certified as candidates, ordained as ministers, or appointed to serve in the United Methodist Church. Appointed. Now, the UMC has used this language to ordain persons who identify in the LGBTQ category. And this has become a separating point, I think, this is my opinion here, for the Global Methodist Church. The boards of ordained ministry, who approved me, who approve every pastor, across the globe, they have ordained persons in the LGBTQ community now, knowing that they are not actually practicing, and that is the key. The question is, does the statement mean both and, or either or? Does it mean that therefore self-avowed and practicing are not to be, or is it self-avowed or practicing cannot be ordained? The Global Methodist Church, I believe, interprets the language to be either or, self-avowed or practicing, to disqualify them for leadership. And it's kind of one of the reasons that they feel they want to move to separate. But the language has not changed. I believe that it will probably be clarified as, there's the tension between, it says, self-avowed practicing. I believe that will probably be further clarified what they mean, because it's become a contention, and you can see the tension. That it is not very clear, it just says self-avowed practicing. If it will indeed change, the change will not happen until 2024. And there's proposals out there, but it has to be voted by the elected United Methodist Church members who were elected to the 2020 General Conference. That's what we know right now. The slate of those persons have not changed. What was elected then will go and vote. Another question that I've gotten is, why are they splitting? Why is the Global Methodist Church splitting from the Methodist Church? What's the difference? Difference is, I believe, that they want to promote reform, and they also want to be a denomination that clearly states that homosexuality disqualifies you for Christian marriage and disqualifies you for ordained ministry. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but the issue of the practicing and self-avowed seems to be the contention, and we saw that in our annual conference this past year. But the history of the United Methodist Church has always been a denomination that allowed room for discussion and debate on theology. The Methodist Church, for example, doesn't support war, but it supports soldiers. A similar thing within our church, talking about abortion. This is what it says: our belief in the sanctity of the unborn human life makes us reluctant to approve abortion. The key word is reluctant. But we are equally bound to respect the sacredness of life and well-being of the mother and the unborn child. The United Methodist Church does not affirm abortion as a means of birth control. We also unconditionally reject abortion as a means of gender selection or eugenics. And it says, last one, we also reject late-term abortions except where the mother's life is in danger or in case of severe fetal abnormalities incompatible with life. So with our current issue of abortion in our world, I hope this finds a little helpful as we are Methodists. This is what the Methodist Church has stated. Divorce is another one where there's some room for conversation. God's plan is for a lifelong faithful marriage. However, when marriage is estranged beyond reconciliation, divorce is a regrettable alternative in the midst of brokenness. So you can see the Methodist Church does not take one stance over the other. It tries to value both sides of the issue while keeping to the sacredness and standard of Scripture. And so as for the issue of homosexuality, the Global Methodist Church and the United Methodist Church, I think they're in debate. The Global Methodist Church wants to create denomination where there's no debate, there's no however. The United Methodist Church is seeking to continue, thank you. The United Methodist Church is continuing to create room for healthy debate over this issue of human sexuality. In my opinion, I assume that the denomination will write some new language at some time. I don't know if it'll happen in 24, but I believe that they will write some form of language to create room for debate. You know, there's instances in our denomination, though, in our book of discipline, where there is no room for debate, differing opinions. Examples of that are, it's called our doctrinal standards. We believe in a triune God. We believe in prevenient grace, salvation through Jesus Christ. And so of these, there are no other viewpoints to be had. This is the belief that we attain. They are our doctrinal standards. So some of the leaders of our church, I've said, we've attended some of the different sessions put on both the Global and the United Methodist to get information. We want to be informed. And so I know I've attended a session by the United Methodist Church. I have not gone to the Global Methodist Association. But at the United Methodist Church sessions that I attended, this was the message that they communicated, that the UMC will make room for traditional churches while at the same time making space for progressive churches. That was the message that I heard when I was there. Again, there is another one of these if you would like to go on August 22nd in San Lando at 7 o'clock on Monday. We have been invited to go. And so there are different theories on what will happen, but again, nothing will happen until 2024. Another thing that I want to address is you may have seen a lawsuit that has appeared in the local newspaper. 106 churches have contracted a lawyer to sue the Methodist Church. I mourn the situation that's in the lawsuit and how it made, or what steps made it to come to this. But they are suing because they want to contend the process of the amount of money that the UMC is giving and other things, the process of disaffiliation. The lawsuit, it shows me that there is just contention within our Methodist Church. There is contention within our Florida United Methodist Church in our Florida conference. And it brings us to what happened in our annual conference this year in June. Maybe you've heard some of these things, but our board of our ministry, they brought before 3 persons of a 16 slate group. 3 of those persons of those 16 claimed to themselves to be a part of the LGBT community. The board approved them in line with our current discipline. And again, every year at the beginning of the annual conference, we gather together as clergy and as lay, and then were matters to be voted on. And one of those was to vote on who was approved by the board of our ministry. And all clergy have a vote. Another one, we also vote on lots of things. One of the things is permanent leave, temporary leave, persons who need to leave for reasons of disability, family leave. We vote on them too. Or those who wish to no longer be to be a pastor, we vote on them as well. And there's other voting matters, but these there was tension this year a little bit. When it came time to vote for those persons adorned by the ordained ministry, the vote failed to approve them, and it was 70%. It has to have 75%. Then there was another moment where a clergy wanted to leave the Methodist Church and join the Global Methodist Church. He asked the bishop to leave by a different paragraph than what was presented by him, and so the bishop conferred with this individual on the floor and then offered a gesture of grace, and he allowed him to leave as he wished to leave. And then it was out of this spirit that he stood up and asked to vote again on the 16 clergy, asked for a revote, and so only persons that vote no could call for a revote. It needed 2 persons, and so we voted again as a clergy, and it was 73%. Again, it reveals how our clergy are just not in agreement, what is the word? And all of us all together were not in agreement. But so in response at the annual conference, people suggested to let's have another special called conference that would give the bishop another chance for us to vote, and also a chance for these churches who wish to leave and didn't get everything done in the time frame that the annual conference set, to give them a chance to go before and vote to disaffiliate as they wished. Because there were some, as you heard, there was 106 that voted. Some of those wished to leave but didn't get everything done in the right time frame. So bishop wanted to give them more time, and which is happening again in the fall. So the conference is being set as we speak, and so I had 4 questions, and so I've tried to answer them as best I can. Some of this comes from my interpretation of what's going on. I hope that I have not spoken out of turn, but I really want to try to communicate everything as best as I know it and as best as I am hearing it and seeing it. And so, again, if you have questions, the UMC is having that town hall with the DS in San Lando. But this is all the presentation that I had. I wanted to relate this information to you, and I'm sorry if I was a little fast. I have my person here who always likes to wave her hand and help me. I'm a little nervous if you can't tell. I want to make sure, because one of the things that I hate to do is I don't like to tell things that are false, or I want to try to be as truthful as I can. And sometimes when you say it, it goes out there, right? And so what you say, it goes. And so I want to be as open as I can. So if there's any questions, I will take them now, and I will try to answer them as best as I can. I have a microphone here. Just a visitor.
I'm just a visitor. That's where I park, visitor parking. Sue has her own spot. As an outsider, somebody asked me, as an outsider, what do you think of the human race? Well, that's a long story. The question, the key question for me, or puzzlement for me, I guess, is it can be either be Methodist or Methodish. Seems like some people want to be Methodish, according to, now I'm not trying to be funny about it, but aren't people, clergy groups, allowed to leave and go become whatever denomination they want to be?
There's a process for that. They have to go about a process, and we saw one of those persons went through that process and went before annual conference.
In other words, you can be any kind of church you want, but you can't call yourself United Methodist. It's like a trademark, so to speak, trademark.
Yeah, in order to become a United Methodist church, there are qualifications. The minimum is like 50 people. There's a budgetary requirements. There's a property involved. Right. There are categories that you have to fulfill before you become a United Methodist church.
But in order to form their own, whatever type of denomination they're going to call themselves, they can't use the official, the official
right.
name. United
Right.
Which brings me to collective. It's probably a longer story than needs to take up, but is collective? Collective said they went out of business, so to speak. They didn't have enough funding to continue. So I don't know if collective was a kind of like a offshout or an experiment or a... So
they were basically a new church start. They're a fresh expression was the correct terminology, but they were a new church start collective, that in the land that closed. They were not yet a United Methodist church with a trademark. They were building up to that. They were getting those 50 members. One other thing is you have to support your own budget. You have to support your own budget 100%. That's one of the things that in order to be a Methodist church you have to do. And so the collective received money from the conference, and we're working up to that point to have all of their budget supported by their own members. And so once they hit all the categories, then they could have been a United Methodist church. They were working towards that. And they give them a period. So once there are lots of new church starts in our conference, and they happen all the time, they start as a new church start, and then the conference helps them just become a United Methodist church. And so they don't just say, here's a new church start, and, go and do what but we'll help you so that you can support yourself, because we know it's hard as a new church start.
So Ben Collins is actually an ordained Methodist minister,
Yes.
and I forget her name.
Caitlin White. Caitlin
Yeah.
White, yeah.
Yeah.
She this year, I think it was, she became an ordained elder. She went through the whole process,
Okay.
or maybe it was last year. I can't remember.
Elder becoming a minister.
Right. So there's a process to becoming a church. There's a process to becoming a minister.
Right.
There's different steps. Okay. And so both he and Caitlin are done all the steps.
Okay, all right.
To land. It was a fresh expression. It met they bought a building. I think it was an old coffee shop. I can't remember. Oh, theater. It was an old theater. They bought a theater, and they were just a different church. They were a collective, what their name was.
Pastor, the conference, actually, we voted at the conference, we voted to accept them. They closed, and we voted for their acceptance.
That's right.
So they're up and running.
So they are now. So again, everything has to be voted on at annual conference. What's voted on the local church. Then people of the congregation of collective asked to be open at least another year, and we voted on it, and we voted to allow them to function for another year. However, they're not in the budget anymore. They don't have any money coming from the United Methodist Church, and so they are figuring out what the future looks like for them, and can they be United Methodist Church. And so this year is a year of discernment for them. And so then next year we will get a report from them, the collective, to know exactly what their plan is. But just if you are concerned about our church, it will become very apparent if we're ever even at risk of being closed. There is a process called the Nehemiah Project, which gives the church at least 2 years to discern what they want to do. If they want to close, if they want to stay open, they have to make certain choices. And so there is a process for closure. And we will be aware, and you will be aware, because the district superintendent is involved with that. But I've heard some concern, but I just wanted to let you know that there is no concern.
My question is, if we do not separate and we remain United Methodist Church, what will our church look like? How will it change?
So what they are saying is they don't foresee any changes to the local church unless you have the desire. And they are creating language right now. If something were to happen, how can we respect the wishes of the local church? Because like they said, we want to create room for traditional churches and conservative and progressive churches and help them be the church that they are and not have to change to what the United Methodist Church may have created space for. And so they are creating language so that nothing will happen or will have to happen for those churches who just want to stay where they are. And just stay, moving in the traditional path that they're going, but right now they want to create some room for progressive churches to move where they want to move. But right now there will be no change.
So in this new language, the church couldn't be forced,
right,
to accept things that
right.
maybe the congregation doesn't want or isn't ready for.
Correct, and that is what they are stressing. Right now is that they will never be a situation where they will force it on you, and they are going to create language to support that so that it's not just something that they say, but it's in writing within our book of discipline. They're going to add it in there so that there can, again, be room for both traditional and progressive churches. However they desire to wish to function, they will keep functioning in that vein.
And that would cover lawsuits. It couldn't be forced from the public to change your church people weren't accepted or
Yeah, well,
ways weren't accepted?
I mean, there are churches who are like that now, and their lawsuits that I know of aren't going forward for churches who are, have those in their language, and so I don't believe that we will open ourselves up for any lawsuit.
Pastor, we have a question from the live stream.
Yes.
Can we survey the congregation and get an idea of which way we are leaning?
And that is what, if your desire is to survey the church to get a holistic picture, I want to help do that. And so, that would have to, again, someone would have to make a nomination for church council. Church council would then vote on that. And then we would bring it before, everybody. It wouldn't, we could do it. We could have it unofficially. We could bring in the DS. Or however you would like to do that. I would say bring in a nomination, create a nomination, and we can bring it before the church council. One thing that I really would hate to do is I would hate to create sides and create some tension. But if it is a concern, if it is something that you would think would be helpful to our church, then let's create a way to do that, and let's create a nomination that can be helpful and not create division. Again, like Ed was saying, we are the family, and we want to be family together. And so I think that our church council would be open to a presentation of that matter, and then we can move however you feel we need to move. But again, join together as groups, and or as maybe bring people from other opinions who have, and create a nominate, or what is it? Is nomination the right word? A motion. Create a motion. Yes.
Just so I can be clear on what our church, United Methodist Church, that we're part of, if we stay United Methodist Church, that means anybody that considers himself a LGBTQ or plus will never be a pastor that serves in a United Methodist Church, or no same-sex marriages in the United Methodist Church. Is that correct?
That's their current view.
Right.
And so that's so that's what has to be changed at annual conference. I have heard people who said that they don't see that maybe changing, but I also heard people say that may change. And so right now, I read to you the current view, and so right now everything is going to be the same unless something happens in 2024. It has to be voted on, has to be brought, there's small groups, then it has to be brought to a large group, and the large group has to vote to change the book of discipline to do that. Right now it has not changed, but there is, thinking that it may.
Pastor,
Yes.
at the conference, there was the vote. You had the 16, there were 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
They were openly
Mm-hmm.
self-avowed
Mm-hmm.
gay,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you want to call, for ordination. And they wanted to have a revote
Mm-hmm.
for them. And our co-lay leaders of the conference are gay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the conference is leaning for gay. I'm not saying that negatively. I think that they were spirited. I haven't never seen people so gifted for the Lord than they were. I'm not being judgmental, but I don't think that you can't say that the church as a whole, the conference as a whole, is not leaning that way.
Yeah.
It's going to be open.
You
So
can certainly make that assumption. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just by what you see,
that's what I'm saying. So, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing for us, but that's not a saying for our church. That's a thing that we have to worry about. Our church is our church. we're all different people. Political beliefs are things that we worry about, things that our selections of things that we choose. They're different, but we always work together. We've always been an integral part of each other's lives. And we're here together now. And that's what's important. And if it takes us getting upset with each other for a vote, that's terrible. We don't need to lose any person in this church because we have to vote. We need to be together. We need not to pick sides. So that's my opinion.
Well, thank you. So it's hard. It's hard seeing what's happening. It's hard being a part of it. And so we just have to continually pray. Pray for our church. Pray for those who are leaving. We need to just continue to pray. That God's love would reign supreme and would remain through it all. Which we know it will be. That's the hope of the Scriptures. Yes.
I'm thinking of the heart attacks and panic attacks people had when Pope John the 23rd made changes in the Catholic Church. And on a local level, where the rubber meets the road, I remember people being so scandalized, horrible, leaving the church because a woman was up there giving out communion, you know. And there were little groups forming, you know, they pray in Latin, dressed in black, pray in Latin, and not talk to anybody. You know, it's like just awful stuff going on. It's like, she's a woman giving out communion. What's the problem, you know? But I think at the time there was a distinction trying to be made between pastoral care, pastoral support. You know, I support you as a person, you know, woman, Greek, slave, free, you know, gay. I support your needs as a human, your desire to be a Christian. But I'm not putting the imprimatur, the stamp of approval, good housekeeping approval on. There's a difference between pastoral care and advocating. You're not advocating this as a life change that everybody should do, you know. Homosexuals don't go out and try to get converts. They just are who they are, you know. And it's like, at least we don't beat them up in the streets. Well, that's nice, you know, but you could do a little bit more. I guess I'm kind of rambling here, but I understand the distinction between if we allow this or, you know, to happen, are we advocating it, you know, promoting it, you know, that sort of thing. And so that becomes a rough call, you know. It's like, you know, by permitting abortion, it doesn't mean you're advocating it. You know, got a problem, get an abortion. Got a problem, get an abortion. So I'm hoping, or at least that's the feeling I get from what you and the church is trying to do, is to balance the, you know, zero tolerance with what, you know, what we're supposed to be as Christians, you know, pastoral concern.
Yes. It's a big task that the Methodist Church is facing, a big task. And again, we need to continue to pray for the task that the Methodist Church has, and how they will bring forth a resolution. I don't know, but they are working tirelessly on creating resolution for what's going on, but that we, in the Methodist Church as a whole. And so I pray for them every day, for the decisions they have to make, and how they're going to bring forth resolution. So we should continue to pray too for the resolution.
Pastor, to the question online that was about the survey,
Yes.
in my research, there is a group, and I think they're even out of Orlando, that would serve. They have a way of doing it, and it would be all, nobody would know who was saying what. It wouldn't be a divisive thing. And I think it's $150 for a church of this size to just get the temperature of the church, of who we are as a body. And that would tell us whether we, as a body, would say, should we pursue or not pursue? I mean, it'd be a very small thing to do, and it would be anonymous, and I don't see where it would cause, sides.
Well, again, I would tell that that person to work to try to bring about a motion, and let's work together and let's see how we can bring this together. But I think that we all need to agree. And again, I would ask that person bring other people from other sides, and let's create a way for us to do that if that's the desire.
If I
This
can
is just
add,
for online people.
Oh, sorry. I agree. A vote is not going to hurt anything if it's taken anonymously. You don't have to sign your name. Anybody that wants to vote can vote. But we don't need to pay somebody $150 to do it. We can do it ourselves. I mean, really, people. Black marble, white marble, I don't care. But what we do with that information is what I'm wondering.
Right.
I think I'm hearing a little bit of maybe concern about the church moving in a direction that people don't agree with as a whole, and I want to that maybe individuals don't agree with, and I want to just say that if the conference was to move in a progressive direction as a whole, they would not then appoint pastors who would identify with an LGBTQ stance over congregations who are not open to that. That would be a mess between the pastor and the congregation. So they wouldn't force an LGBTQ pastor onto a more traditional congregation. That would just create a disaster for the conference, for the congregation, for the pastor themselves. So if we as a church remained more traditional, we would not be forced into a more progressive stance by the conference. It's not something we need to worry about.
Yeah, that's what they have said. That's what they have said.
They want to
And they're
allow
creating
it for
language
both
again
sides, and
around
they want
that.
to permit us to be who we are. So even if the conference, the higher ups, move in a direction that we don't necessarily agree with, they will still allow us to remain however we are. And so I think I'm hearing some worry about people who think that we might be forced one way or the other, and that is absolutely not what the conference is trying to do in any sort. And they are trying to create language within the discipline, as Ryan has said, that will prevent the higher ups from coming in and messing with the church at a local level.
So, for example, our SPR, when a pastor is set to leave, they suggest to the church right now, there is a process of, this is the kind of church pastor we are looking for, and then the cabinet gathers together, and they create the appointments, and then they bring it to the local church. I've seen situations where the local church has said no, emphatically no, and they have respected it. And so right now there is no particular language that gives churches room to say no. I mean, they've given them like some freedom, I guess, but there's no really official language that it can be so there has to be new language created so that the churches, especially for this issue, how will the churches say no, and how will they respect those wishes? So something new has to be created. And so they are looking to do that. And so they are figuring out how is the best way to write that in so that wishes can be respected and the churches can remain the churches.
Is this on? Is this working? All right. I just want to make a simple, logical point. I'm quite aware that many people in our church had not a clue what this town meeting was even about. And so to ask anybody to say, we're going to take a vote, I think you would have to have a comprehensive educational process within the congregation to let them know what they were even voting on, because some people are even unaware about this. Other people have misinformation about it. And so I think it's really premature, even though we're curious, what do people think? I think to actually take a vote and have people make a mark on a piece of paper would be a very divisive thing. And I just think it's premature.
Do you have another question, Bonnie? You forgot what it was? I'll think about it.
That's what happens when you interrupt.
Just one comment on if you're calling for a vote, you have to know the language of what you're voting on. So anything, say, when we go to vote at the polls, how that election is crafted for certain amendments is a political process. So it would require a lot of debate about exactly the wording of what people were voting on, even if it's just kind of getting a feel of where the church is. That in itself would create even more debate, because I'm sure that depending on which way you're leaning, the way that question is crafted could cause some either just anger or just unsure about what you're actually voting for. There could be confusion about whether you're actually voting to leave the church and then leave the UMC in that moment. So it's looking for a vote, it can create a lot of confusion as well. So it just has to be something debated further.
Yeah, I think our church council will need to create some official way to field these motions in a way to communicate what's going on. Like I've heard, there are some people who don't not know what's going on. So the church council will need to be tasked with how we field such a request. And I don't want to be able to bring that back to you so that you will know how we field such a request or motion. And so that needs to be thought about, and we will do some thinking about that. If there was a motion, how would we field it? How would we communicate it? How would we make sure, how we do it all? I think that needs to be talked about in our church council of how we field those. So.
I just feel any sort of survey or vote just sets us up to the possibility of division. We're a family. We're going to have differing opinions. And I just find that, I think that's just going to set us up for the possibility of some division.
Yes, I mean, our church is, we have differing opinions, and that's how you've always been. As I look past the history, I think of the other pastors, you've always had differing opinions. And so the question is, how we need to know how divisive or how differing of how our opinions are differed? What are the exact numbers? Do we need to know that? Is that important to us? Or can we be a church of differing opinions and move into the future? And so that's, and can we continue to be that? Or would a vote help us? Again, would a vote help us? How would it help us? That's the questions we need to consider. Just for the, oh, there it is. I laid it down over here.
Okay, let me see if I can say this correctly. If you believe in something and others don't agree with you, that's fine. However, if my belief causes me to disassociate because my belief is that strong, then that's what I want to do or need to do. Once upon a time we had slavery. Did you ignore it? Did you fight against it? And these are the things, I don't know if that's making any sense as an analogy. It's pretty a bad one. I wish I had time to talk to Tom back there. He's so good about it. But knowing how your church feels may determine what you need to do for yourself. I don't want to know who feels what way. I don't need to know that. But I would like to know how my church feels, because I may choose to go elsewhere. Yes, Tom, we are a family. We all care for each other. That's very nice and kumbaya-ish, but my beliefs also need to be taken into consideration. And if my church feels differently than I do, and I'm very strong about that, then I have the choice to leave. And that's all I'm saying. It's not for or against. It's just standing up for my beliefs. Thank you.
Well, I believe we should just all pray about it and adjourn this meeting.
Yes. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, we are 10 minutes over. Yes, pray about it and talk about it. And, I believe we're a wonderful church, and I want to say I am very proud of each and every one of you, the work that we do. I am proud of our church. But I wanted to say that as a pastor, and I'm glad to be your pastor. Thank you.
We all have one thing in common. That's our belief in God and that Christ is our Savior. That's our baseline. That's what we should go off of, our baseline. As that gentleman said, we should pray on it. But that's our common denominator, that everybody in here has the same belief, that we believe in God Almighty and Jesus is our Savior. And that should be our basis. That's our rock. And we should make our decisions based on that.
Yes. Well, let's go in prayer. God, we come to you today, and we worship you as our Savior, as our Lord. We are all united as followers of Jesus Christ. We thank you for the work that he did for each of us, and the work that he continues to do in our hearts, and our minds, and our bodies. We pray that you would lead us. You would give us wisdom. I pray for wisdom in our church today. Lead us and guide us. Help us remain the body of Christ. Help us to move as you need us to move. So again, we ask you to give us wisdom and guide us into the future. But we thank you today for the love of Jesus Christ. that carries us all through. So God, I thank you for bringing us here. Unite us again together next week. Let us continually worship you. And let us be united together for a common cause of bringing your kingdom here on this earth. Amen. Go in peace.